All right. So the sermon today is going to maybe be a little bit different in the sense it's going to be probably a little more of a teaching sermon that I'm going to do today than some prophetic sermon. But I want to tell you a little bit about this sermon and why I think this is important, and even important on today like today. So if you go into the passages that are listed in the bulletin for today's sermon, they are not pretty passages. What we're going to use is the imagery that is found in these passages. What I want to do, my goal with this sermon, which my preaching professor would say, don't tell people what your goal is. Well, I didn't do well in that class, so here I am. My goal is to expand the way in which we think about God. Expand our language, expand how we envision God and how we understand God. As I told you a couple weeks ago, you all are theologians. You all have a thought about God, and we're going to try to expand beyond that, and we can get some really great images from these verses. I also want to acknowledge that male language has absolutely dominated how we speak about God. We refer to God as Father, man, he, him, and I'm good. Okay, so let me just make sure I'm clear. Disclaimer, big asterisk. If that's how you refer to God, that's fine. Do that. Great. Do that. I'm not asking you to change that. I'm just going to expand. I want us to expand. I'm going to stretch you a little bit today. And for some, this is going to be a stretch. I know exactly what I'm getting into today. I don't know how you all will react to it, but I've had many complaints after I've given a sermon like this because it's challenging. God is male. God is a man. That's the way it is. And they have run to my senior ministers in the past, and I literally was going to send this book to somebody in my church as a joke, but I thought, no, I won't do that. But this book, I'm going to read this book later. It has some powerful images about God. You've heard it already in some of our liturgy. In one of the prayers, I referred to God as mother and father. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to stretch you a little bit today. And if this is struggling for you, if this is difficult, come talk to me. I love these conversations. I love to hear from people. I love to discuss this kind of stuff. But some ground rules for as we do this, and as we learn and expand about how we see God. Mary Daly, who is a pretty popular feminist theologian and philosopher, says that when you talk about language for God, you can't just shift male language and patriarchal language from God and just do away with it and shift it over to woman and female and matriarchal, because all you do is shift it. And you're not really making any expansion on how we understand God. You can't do that. So it becomes a both and. So this is not, again, I want to make sure I'm very clear, we're not shifting this, but what we have to understand is that when we only refer to God as Father, as male, as man, there are people who have been abused and hurt by male and man and father. How do you think they see God? How do you think? My father was not a loving human being. A loving father is not a concept I know. So when I think about God, I have to find God in other people. Where I found God, my foundation that I've only been able to reflect on in time was from my church mothers in the Presbyterian Church in Kendallville, Indiana. If I walked in that place today, they wouldn't know who I was. They wouldn't know. I probably wouldn't even know any of them. And I told the story, my mom made me go to church, right? And there's some reasons why she didn't go, but she made me go. Back in the old days, I could walk to church, the neighborhood church, walk to it. And man, you guys remind me of them. They always had meals on Sundays. I still remember crock pots and food, and they would always let me back in the kitchen and to sneak food and stuff like that. And I remember being a deacon and playing tic-tac-toe in the back before iPhones, and with my neighbor friend. His name was Chad. We had two Chads. So we would sit in the back and we would watch people take communion. We didn't always get it. We definitely didn't pay attention to the preacher. But what I just remember. Just remember how they made me feel. How they made me feel. Supported, loved, welcome. I come from a divorced family. It wasn't a pretty divorce. I didn't have a great relationship with my father. It was difficult. But that church, those people in that church, those women in that church made me feel so loved that I realize now I would not be a minister today without them. That was the foundation. It was a thin foundation. Oh, I didn't know scripture or Bible stories, or I didn't know any of that stuff. That's why if you talk to me about like young people and kids, I don't care about any of that. Man, I want them to feel like they're loved in a space, because we'll let God work it out later. God worked it out later for me. God can work it out later for all of us and for them. But for me, it's the church mothers. That's where I saw God. So for me, God is more of a mother. And when I think about my own mom on a day like today, I didn't have the blessing of knowing my mom as somebody who was older, right? She died when I was 18 years old. I only knew my mom from the standpoint of being a teenager and a kid. My older siblings, they got to know my mom as they got older and developed more of a friendship. I only knew my mom as an authority figure, right? That's it. That's all I really knew my mom. And really the last couple years when she was battling cancer, all I knew my mom was that. Those last couple years was just her and the sickness that was taking her. So we didn't really develop beyond that. But my mom's much more complex. Your relationship with your parents, your friends, your family, your loved ones, it's much more complex. People who are close to you have a certain viewpoint of you, and that's who you are to them. Others have a certain viewpoint. Brian, I'm sure coworkers have a certain viewpoint, right? All that encapsulates who we are. Well, God is the same way. When we allow more voices to speak on God and share their experiences and who God is, we get a bigger picture of God. And I know some people say, yeah, but man, I don't know, Chad. You know, the Bible says, it says this. I think God is only man. And one of the things I read one time that says, if we think God is only man, then man is God. And we can see that in history. In how men have used their status of being above women and use it to oppress and use it to do what they want with women. That was based on theology. And you see this in more like the Roman and Greek culture. If you know anything about Roman and Greek culture and then you compare it to Egyptian culture, like the reason why Cleopatra had power, because they didn't put women in oppressive states in Egypt. You were allowed to have the same kind of title and status as men, but in Roman and Greek culture, not so much. Well, who writes a lot of the New Testament? Greeks. A lot of that language is Greek. So culture has affected the way the Bible has been written, scriptures have been written. You will actually see a lot of feminine language in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. You will see women in positions of power, like Deborah in the Old Testament, because the people that were writing those stories are more from a Middle East background. That's my take on it. But between those two stories and the way those people write that, we get a broader picture of God and how God has moved inside these people and around these people. And that becomes challenging. I think for us men, that also becomes challenging. That sometimes like, yeah, but do we do that today? But that's not today. It isn't? It isn't? I'd challenge that. Maybe not to the degree. But I would even say the way that the culture has thought about men has even put us as men inside a box and has done harm to us and not allowed us to be free and human as God has created us. And I'm going to get to that here in a second. It's a form of liberation and freedom when we grow in our understanding of God. And so the second ground rule always is to be open to how others experience God and come to know God. But God is hard to grasp, to understand, right? People have spent thousands of years trying to understand God. We have doctorates and master's degrees and podcasts and books and commentaries and, how many translations of the Bible do we have? All the world trying to understand God, and guess what? We still don't know everything about God, and we still will never know everything about God. I see some younger people. How good are you all at calculus? You know calculus well? Good. Thank God, because I don't know calculus. Anybody else know calculus? Brian does, like 2 people. Great, cool. The rest of us, if we can't grasp calculus, how are we going to grasp God? Right? Let's just be honest about that. I mean, God is complex and difficult. I think I got to like algebra. That was hard. Well, maybe geometry. I didn't do algebra 2, I know that. What is? Geometry's not bad. I can do right angles. That's about it. Don't ask me to construct anything. But God is hard for us to grasp. And so it is important for us to be challenged and stretched in trying to see God and how God works in all these spaces. I'll blow your mind with something. It's a little off topic. I'll blow your mind with something. It's a TikTok video that came out recently. A guy made a comment saying, what if God is water? It's the life force of everything. If we want to find a planet, what do we look for? Water. It's in us, around us. It gives us life. It has everything. Now, do I think God is water? No. But that's interesting. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. I never thought of that. I never thought that, where is that God that's everywhere and in everything? I mean, water is in everything. I don't know. It was interesting. So people are thinking about God all the time in unique and different ways that we've never even considered. And it's okay for us to say, yeah, I don't know. But that's interesting. We can do that. Right? That's a fair thing. That's what I hope we kind of walk away from today. So in the passage in Matthew 23:37, there's some imagery Jesus uses. And Jesus says, how often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Jesus uses this female imagery. What we kind of miss in this story also with Jesus, because he is speaking about himself, and I do, as I've said before, I believe Jesus is a reflection of God in the world, is a reflection of God's love. But Jesus is also playing a certain role. He is lamenting. He's lamenting for the disobedience of Israel and God's people. He is playing a role of a public mourner. He's given a speech. He's lament. And public mourners is an actual role played by women in that time. Jesus took that role, culturally dominated by women. Men didn't do it, and took it upon himself and reformed it, much like he did the cross. When people saw that, boy, they ran in fear. They knew what was coming. That doesn't mean that the same way anymore. Jesus has taken that and reformed it. Jesus also shows us ways in which we can be very compassionate. In the story of Lazarus, when Lazarus dies, Jesus cries with the family. You want to know how I know God is with us in our grief? It's this story. I go to it every time. It's this story right here. Jesus knows he is going to resurrect Lazarus. Jesus easily could just say, well, who cares? Dude, don't worry about it. I got it. I'm going to bring him back to life. You're fine. Don't worry about it. You don't have to get upset. I got you. But Jesus doesn't do that. He takes a minute and cries with the family. I don't know about you all, but men, how many times have you been told you can't cry? Be a man. Toughen up. Like, we are still afraid to show vulnerability in 2023. No way would my dad show that kind of vulnerability raising me as a son. What do you think that does to me? I have to really be conscious about that with my own kids, and I'm still uncomfortable. But thank God through children, they're helping me to break out of that mold. See, I've been put in that box by culture, by my dad, by people around me. And I want to break out, and I see a Jesus who breaks those down and says, you know what, for the last 2,000 years, man, my story's been written, and you see me crying and playing a role here in public. it's okay to do this. It's okay to take on aspects of the feminine. Because Jesus is showing compassion, right? We turn to our mothers for compassion. Typically, we don't turn to our fathers. We turn to our mothers. They kiss the boo-boo. They make it all better. They give us the hugs. They tell you it's going to be all right. Dads tell you, buck up, get tough. Sometimes moms do it, but typically, it's the way it is. So we can learn from Jesus in this moment. I can see a compassionate God in Jesus, a God that isn't going to tell me to buck up and toughen up, a God that's going to cry with me, a God that's going to lament with me and be frustrated. In Hosea, in this passage, we see another image of God. It says, like a bear robbed of her cubs, I will attack them and rip them open. Not lovely, but the image of a bear protecting her cubs. Anybody ever had to bring out Mama Bear before? We ever talk about that? Mama Bear? Yeah? I bet you all probably use that a little bit. Don't let Mama Bear come out. Scripture. 2,000 years ago, 2,000 plus years ago, when that book was written, they knew about that. Mama Bear been around for a while. It's been around. And what's happening here is Israel has turned away from God. They've been disobedient. So God is talking about punishing Israel. That's what this is. God's talking about ripping them open and devouring them. I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like, ouch. Have you ever been punished by mom? Does it feel different than dad? Is it more painful or less painful? I don't know. More. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Whoever got that one hurts. Ugh. I love telling the story. I cussed at my mom once. My mom was 5 foot, about $110, soaking wet on a good day. Not an intimidating woman, great with kids, sweet. My mom was a warrior. If you had to tell me what a warrior looked like, it's my mom. My mom, when she was diagnosed with cancer, she did all the treatments, bone marrow, all this stuff. She had liver cancer, ended up spreading really bad. They told her eventually it came back, and I was home on a break, and they said, well, her side was hurting. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I don't know, my side hurts. And I was like, well, I know what that is. That's the end. It was back. And my mom refused to do chemo again. If you ever seen chemotherapy and people go through that, it's awful. She wasn't going to do it. And she decided not to. And I got a call about 2 weeks later. She said, yeah, it's back. I got 6 weeks to live. I go, when did they tell you that? 2 weeks ago. What? She go, I didn't want to worry. You're at college. You got to live your life. You got to do your life, Chad. I'm going to die. You're going to live. You got to go on. That was my mom. I came home. Last time I saw her alive, I knew she's going to go to college. You got to go. You got to leave the house, go to college. You can't stay here and wait for me to die. That weekend that I came home was like the weekend before. She decided she did not want to just sit home and die. She wanted to go to work. So she worked until she couldn't work anymore. She's like, I'm not going to sit there and wait to die. I'm just going to go work. That's a warrior. I remember cleaning out her desk at her job knowing that this is it. And I remember when I had to go back to college and I had to say goodbye to my mom, knowing the next time I would see her would be her funeral. Talk about the hardest walk of my life out that door. My mom's a warrior, though. She kind of gave that to me, too. I mean, I saw that. And so sometimes, like, buck up, Chad, toughen up. I got that from my mom at times. But I also saw this really compassionate person. But I still remember the time I cursed at my mom, living on Mitchell Street in Kendallville, Indiana, upstairs in my bedroom, kneeling down on the ground in front of a dresser. I don't know what we were doing. I can't remember the exact word, and if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to say it today. And, now I'm not condoning hitting kids. That's just what my mom did in that moment, but boy, did I get it. Never had that happen. It's the last time I did that. It's the last time. And I've been punished like that from my dad. That felt different from my mom. So I have to imagine when God is talking about punishing Israel like a bear with her cubs, this is getting serious. Change your ways. God is trying to convey, wisdom, wants them to obey. Listen, I know what's best for you. I love you more than anything in the world. As a mother loves her cubs, I will protect you. I will devour your enemies if I have to. Just listen to me. Pay attention. I got your best intentions. And we see God doing that. And God's love never, ever abandons Israel. Even when he's disappointed, even when God punishes them, even when God has to chase after them, God is still trying to redeem them. He never abandons them. And I see that in parents. It doesn't matter what a kid does. We still love them. Well, we can be disappointed, but we still love them. So I'm going to read a book today. It doesn't take long. Don't worry. It's called Mother God. It's got great imagery in here, if you ever wanted to come by my office and pick it up. It says, you know God the Father, but God is your mother too. You are made in her image. She is making all things new. Waiting for new life to begin, God is a mother in labor. She takes deep breaths until birth, rejoicing with friend and neighbor. Throughout day and night, God wakes to nurse the infant at her side. She snuggles her baby gently until he closes his sleepy eyes. When baby tumbles on the floor, God pulls off each tiny sock. She holds her arms out wide and the baby learns to walk. God is Sophia Wisdom, teaching what is true and right. Wisdom works, creates, orders, and plays. She calls us with joy and delight. Over the waters of creation, God is the Spirit who hovers. She forms the earth into a bed and the wide sky it covers. God is a mother hen who gathers chicks under her wings. She plays hide and seek in soft grass behind trees and quiet springs. She protects her cubs from danger. God, the great mother bear, fierce as she is tender, she guards them in her care. God is a lurking leopard, secretive, skilled, and strong. Teaching her young to swim and climb, she roars as they tag along. With a huge supply of flour, God kneads and bakes good bread. She feeds her entire neighborhood, the feast, and all are fed. God is a skillful seamstress who stitches and sews thread together. She makes clothes for rain, snow, and sun, caring for you in all kinds of weather. Granny, Baba, I can't say it. Halmione. God is a woman with gray hair. She passes down stories of old, rocking softly in a chair. She is the God who sees you. God weeps, mourns, and cries. She comforts you through the longest night, keeping watch until sunrise. She quiets us with her songs, singing lullabies in the night. God, our nurturing mother, wraps us in holy moonlight. God is your loving mother. You are made in her image too. God calls you beloved. She is making all things new. It's a lovely little book. I see mothers in that. I see God at work in that. It's really amazing. When we think of mothers, they'll have played a motherly role. What qualities do you think of? I want you to share those with me. Share those with me. I shared some of mine. What do you think of? Trust. Patient. Comforting. Unconditional love. Compassion. What else? Kindness. Nurturing. Goodness. What was it? Selflessness. Oh, yeah. Guidance. Wisdom. Wisdom in the Bible is referred to as a feminine. I mean, women are kind of smarter than us guys most of the time. They know better. Guys, we don't mature past 13, let's be honest, right? The Spirit is referred to as a feminine. What does that tell us about God? So when we think of God as a noun at times, we think of God as only a noun, a he, him, but let's think of God as a verb. It's one of the things Mary Daly talks about as a verb. We take those qualities and think of God as that. as a compassionate one, a holy protector, a liberator, a great healer, the guider, the great one who I trust? What if we spoke and prayed to God and God as a verb and how God works in the world? Would that start to change and expand about how we think of God and get us outside our box? Being more than a father, being more than a minister, being more than a friend, being more than a male, being more than a sibling. I am more than those things. I am complicated. You are complicated. God is complicated. And as we open ourselves up to venture beyond our own little boxes, we can live into the complex individuals and express the variety of qualities and emotions that we have. The gift that God has given us. The gift to express these kinds of emotions. We can become a little more like our God, or like our good mothers by doing that, and like our mother God. Amen. Oh yeah, invitation, yeah. Thanks, Joy. Very good. Yeah, I forgot that for a few weeks. So yeah, the time for invitation to discipleship. It's always a time I just want people to know when they come to this church, if they find us online, if they come across us, to know that they are welcome through these doors. I am open to conversations. I'll say some kind of controversial. Membership to me, I don't know how I feel about it. I think membership has its privileges in some ways that we serve a church, but just to choose to follow Jesus and say, you know what, this is my community. I want to do this here. We want people to know they are welcome to that, and we can have those discussions about membership, have those discussions about baptism. We just want people to feel welcome into this place. Wherever you're at on your journey, you are welcome here, and we want to have you here and to show our love to you. So just know that you are invited as we sing.